Okay, welcome back, everyone. So today we're going to actually be working on how to handle tokens. Now, there's a little bit of black magic that goes into how we're handling our tokens inside of production. So we're going to try to cover this outside of production first, and then hop into production and try to fix it. So, in order to fix how we are handling tokens, we need to understand how token authentication is actually working. And so far, we haven't actually gone in depth into how is it that Django's grabbing that token from the request, right? We just kind of said, hey, this is what you need to know. You need to know that in order for token authentication to happen, you need to place this class under this attribute, right? But we never actually talked about how that class functions, where the method is located that will authenticate a user. Well, let's talk about that today. So we're going to go into our user app. And in our user app, we're just simply going to go into views. And here in views, we can see that I have this section named token authentication. This doesn't belong to me, right? It belongs to Django REST frameworks. But luckily, Django REST frameworks has this capability where if I press, or VS Code has this capability where if I press Control for Windows or Mac, or for Macs, I hold down Command, and then I click on the command that I want to open, it's going to show me the file where that comes from. So here I can see that I have token authentication class, which is inheritance. It utilizes inheritance to grab base authentication methods. And we can see a couple of things here. So we have this keyword, and this keyword is token. Well, when I go to Postman, all right, every time I make a request, I know that the token needs to be prefaced by the word token. So that's where that is coming from. This is saying, hey, this is what you're going to use to tell me that the following string is going to be a token. All right, and then I see this model is none. Well, we'll see why that is in here in a little bit. And we can see this get model method. This part doesn't really matter to us just yet. But here is where the authentication actually starts to happen. So when a user makes the request, this get authorization method, or actually there's a function, this get authorization header function is actually going to go into the request that was sent, right? Because we're passing the request into this function. It's going to go inside of the request and it's going to find the authorization header. Right, so find the auth, let me place it like this, authorization header. And then it's going to split that header to create a list and create a list. So this list, index 1, should have the keyword of token, and index 2 should have my actual token, right? So that's what's going on so far. Okay, well, now this portion says, if there isn't an authorization header, so if this comes back as undefined or null, in this case it's Python, so this is going to come back as none, right? If this comes back as none, or the auth index 0, so if the first index of my list isn't equal to the keyword, which we can see the keyword is token, it's going to return none. It's going to say, hey, this isn't a valid call at all, so we're not going to do anything. All right. Now, if the length is equal to 1, then it's going to tell me I'm missing something, because that means that the user or the developer either passed just the token or they just passed only the keyword. So then it raises an exception. And if it's greater than 2, well, then whoever it is that made this API call sent too many things on the string. Or maybe they just accidentally placed a space in between their token. So when it was split, it split it into way too many parts. Oh, and here we can see it. Token string should not contain spaces. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. So finally it says, all right, well, if none of these raised errors, then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the token, grab the index 1. So here we are. grabbing the index one. And let me copy that and bring it down here. And it's going to decode it. So it's going to turn this string into something that Python can actually recognize and work with. All right. So now if this fails, if this decode function fails, then we're going to say, hey, this token is a string, but it's not an actual token that we created. So it's going to send us back a token string should not contain invalid characters, or the fact that it may be an invalid token. All right. Now, if it doesn't fail, it's going to send us back this function or this method named authenticate credentials, and it's going to pass in the actual token. Well, authenticate credentials is down here. And now we see the get model method being used. So now let's scroll up to that get model. Get model gets initialized. If says self.model is not none, then return self.model. Well, it's no longer going to be none because we're passing an actual key into it. Model equals self.get model. Actually, I apologize. That was wrong. Let me make sure that I know how this is working correctly. Is not none. Okay, but it is none, so this doesn't do anything. Got it. Okay, so it goes to getting model, and it's saying if the model is not none, but in this case it is because we haven't grabbed anything, then it's going to say, I want you to go into REST frameworks, import token, and I want you to return the token model. All right, so now model represents our token, and finally our token grabs our individual user through its one-to-one related field, and then returns that user. All right, so we can see it return dot user and token. All of this gets returned and it gets placed under request dot user. Okay, we just covered quite a bit of ground, and it may be a little bit hard to read somebody else's code. So at this point, does anyone have any questions over how token authentication is working? How is it grabbing that information from the headers and then moving it?
Is all the encoding and decoding stuff specific to Django? Is that like a built-in thing that Django is handling that somewhere that we're not able to see or access?
Actually, no. It looks like it's just a built-in Python function. But more than likely, Django is utilizing it in a unique way. Okay, it doesn't seem like there are any other questions. So let's go ahead and start talking about token authentication. Well, currently right now, when we sign in, if I go to inspect my browser, and I hop over to the application tab, I've been using local storage so far. And local storage is accessible to JavaScript, and it's not safe at all. It actually opens me up for people to do cross-site scripting attacks, right? Where they're basically able to write plain JavaScript and grab vital information for my program. Well, instead, what I want to do is I want to set it as an HTTP cookie. If I go here, oh, for some reason, it looks like it's already tracking on a cookie. And I think this is an old cookie, and that's why it's tracking on it, because it was from when I was practicing. So I apologize, everyone. But this is going to be our end state. We want to set a cookie here where the token is actually being administered by Django and not by JavaScript. So currently now, if I go to my front end and click on my login function, we're just going to concentrate on one of these functions for today so that we're not overwhelmed with information. So let's go to my login function. We can see that the token is returning the request. And it's not only returning the request, but it's actually returning the body of the request. And I don't want that. I don't want my token to be exposed. Not only that, but I can see that JavaScript is the one that's handling my token. It's setting it to the default headers of API, and it's also setting it to local storage. Well, instead of doing that, I want my Django server to control all that information. So let's get into our actual SSH key now. So let me see here. I believe what I need to do is I need to go into AWS keys. Here I have 2 of them. Now I believe I'm going to be utilizing the uniform deployment PEM. So I'm going to enter through SSH. So SSH-I uniform PEM key. I want to enter as Ubuntu. And then I'm just going to place in my address, which I may have to go to AWS to do so. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording really quick. All right, so now I have this uniform deployment, and I can go ahead and copy my IP address, bring it over, and I believe that's all I need there. I should be able to press enter, and now I'm inside of my Ubuntu instance once again. Okay, great. Well, now let's start editing a couple of things, and I want to concentrate on the backend first. Well, on the backend, I want to fix my settings to make this file a little bit more secure. So I'm going to go ahead and change directory into my deployment lecture, go into my backend, and then I need to go into my to-do project. And then after that, I'm just going to update my settings. So I'm going to say sudo vim settings.py. Okay, yesterday we talked about allowed host, debugging, and then course allow all origins. Well, today we're going to actually change all of these methods so that they're working correctly and that everything is safe during the development process. So let's go ahead and go into insert mode. And instead of allowed host being all, what should allowed host be?
User.
Yeah, my allowed host should be my own DNS system. So I'm going to say HTTP. Oh, HTTPS actually // and this should be tango-deb.com. Okay, it looks like I'm not going to need CSRF trusted origins because I have cores installed. But now instead of course allow all origins, I need to change it to course allowed origins. And I need to change that to also reflect HTTPS tango-deb.com. All right. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to set a couple of different cookies and course credentials things. So let's get in there. I'm gonna make
Hey,
it.
Francisco.
Huh?
I'm sorry. Could you just real quick go over again, like what is exactly allowed hosts and course allowed origins mean?
Course, yeah. So course allowed host means, hey, who's allowed to host me? Where am I allowed to actually be placed on the internet? All right. So I'm saying the only place that I'm allowing you to live is going to be inside of HTTPS Django-deb.com. Course allowed origins means who's allowed to contact me, who's allowed to send me requests, and who am I allowed to talk to. And in this case, I'm just going to tell it that the only person it's allowed to talk to is the same place it's living in. So now if anybody wants to communicate through my Django backend, they need to send a request through my domain name. Does that answer your question, Michael?
I think so, yeah. So any requests being made are only going to be accepted when they're coming from the code that your server is actually running to communicate with your backend.
Exactly. So this is saying that the only entry point to my actual Django project will be through HTTPS // tango-deb.com. So that means or should mean, I think Postman might still work. But if I make like a new index HTML now, and I try to send a request, it's going to give me a course error. It's going to say, hey, we're not allowed to talk to this individual. Only the front end, our React project, is allowed to talk to our API.
What was the reason originally for not just having these already set in your settings as soon as you started deploying the website?
So the reasoning for that was, one, simplicity's sake, to make sure that we were able to actually host our project. And two, remember, if you did this from the very start, you wouldn't be able to test your project until until you have your SSL certificate, until your Route 53 is already set up, and your EC2 instance is all running at the same time.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Of course. All right. So now we're going to go into something called course allowed credentials. So what we're essentially trying to do here is we're trying to send back credentials to the front end, and then we're expecting the front end to send credentials to our back end. So that's what this part is saying. We're going to say, hey, I'm going to allow for credentials to be passed through request. And this one's just going to be as simple as placing true. The next one's going to be session cookie secure. So later on, when we go back to send a cookie, we're going to send it, and we're going to specifically tell Django that this is a cookie. Well, we want this to be a secure cookie, meaning that it's only going to be able to communicate through HTTP. So this is what session cookie secure means. So now I'm only going to grab credentials from HTTP headers, and I'm only going to send credentials through HTTP headers. And then that's where the last part also comes in, where it says session cookie HTTP only. All right, so all these three are just going to allow me to send cookies back and forth and to accept cookies back and forth between my front end and my back end. Any questions?
How about to the user? Just curious, to the client themselves.
What about the client themselves?
Like we send cookie data to the client of the site as well, right? Because we're sending tokens back and forth between the user and ourselves.
Well, the user will never see their token now. So the user is never going to see their token inside of local storage. They're going to see it inside cookies, but they'll never be able to interact with it, with their token. We're basically taking that capability away.
Gotcha.
All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and press the escape key. I'm going to write and quit this file. Okay, so that file was updated. The next thing I need to do is update my views, because now I actually want to make sure that my token is being sent correctly. So I'm going to simply go into my views. So I'm going to change directory back one, go into my user app, and then I'm going to vim into views. All right. Now, this part kind of, I'm not preferably a fan of, because I'm not able to interact with it very much through Vim. So maybe we could do it through VS Code, but we'll try doing it through Vim, and then afterwards, if it doesn't fulfill our purpose, we'll go over to VS Code and see it. So let's change our request a little bit. Currently, our request, or sorry, our response is actually returning a user, that user's email, and a token. But we don't want it to do that anymore. Instead, what I want it to do is just return the user's email. So it should return or let's just say response is equal to response. And that response is just going to have one dictionary, and that dictionary is going to say user, email. It's going to be user.email. Then I close off my response. I don't want my token to be part of that response. All right. Instead, I just want my response to hold my user and my user object. All right. So now the next part is going to be, well, how is it that I want to set this cookie? So I'm going to say response dot set cookie. So this is a built-in method of a response that is quite literally going to set a cookie for my browser. And then I can specify a couple of details. Well, it's still going back in a key and value pair. So I can specify the key. And in this case, I want my key to be token. Just like we see it here, we can see the key is still token. I want the value. And my value should be my token dot key, right? And that's the value portion. And then finally, we can go into who can access this cookie. Well, this cookie should only be accessible through HTTP only.
Hey, Francisco, wasn't token supposed to be capitalized?
So if we look at our variable here, token is lowercase. This token is referencing the model. This is just a variable.
Oh, okay. I was talking about the key. Am I remembering wrong? Was it not looking for the key to be equal to token with a capital T in the method earlier that we were looking at?
Got you. So that's in reference to the request.
Okay. So we
Um,
don't have to worry about that.
correct. So what you're talking about is going to be here when I go into my authorization, or sorry, when I go into my headers and I include it, this is what it's checking. It's checking that word is token and that the next thing is the string. But in our case, when we're setting the cookie, we don't need to worry about those things. And we're actually going to overwrite that method here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. All right. So then I need to specify that this will be transferred securely. So I'll make this true. It's going to say, hey, is this going to be from the same site origin? Well, we know it's not. So I'm going to say that this is going to be lax. And then I remember a couple of days ago, when we were talking about token authentication, I believe it was Ivan that asked, hey, sometimes I log into a website and I'm able to stay on that site for a couple of days. And then if after a couple of days, the website logs me out automatically, what's going on there? Well, that's just your cookie lifespan, right? At some point, your cookie gets deleted from the browser or it dies, et cetera, whatever you want to call it, right? Well, what we can do now is we can create a lifespan for this cookie. So I'm going to go ahead and import another Django library or module, I apologize. So I'm going to import datetime, or from datetime, I'm going to import datetime. And I'm also going to import time delta. And now I'll utilize these down here. So I want to create a lifetime. And let's say I want my lifetime to be 7 days. Well, I'm going to say, hey, I want to grab the time now. So from today, so I can say datetime.now, and I can add the next 7 days by utilizing time delta and saying days equals 7. So this takes my date of today, and then I just add 7 days into it. All right. So now I created this lifespan this lifetime, but unfortunately this lifetime, it's not in the correct format. So I actually need to change its format to be able to set it as an HTTP header. When I can say format lifetime, and that's going to be equal to lifetime dot strf time. So this is just a built-in method of datetime where I specify how I want it to be built. So here I'm going to say, I want you to grab the day. I believe it's day. This portion is just specifying the date. I honestly don't know what each one of these mean right off the top of my head, and I'm not going to try to give you all the wrong answer. So I opened up the string. I'm trying to format it. This left portion of my string is formatting the date. And then the next thing that I needed to format is my hours. Minutes. And seconds. And then I need to give it a time zone. For this case, I'm just going to go with GMT. Okay. So now I generate a token. Right after that, I generate a token lifespan saying it's going to be 7 days from now. It's not in the correct format, so I need to format it correctly. So I utilize the string time method to format it in the exact place that I wanted to. Afterwards, I generate a response that has my user object inside of it. And then I send back a response. Well, actually, I haven't sent my response yet. I set a cookie inside of my response where the key is token, like we see here. The value is token.key. We can see that we're utilizing HTTP only. It is going through secure. And since it's not coming from the same site, I'm saying that it is lax. Okay. So now we need to move on to the final part where I actually give that token lifespan. Well, I could just give it the expires argument. And I can set that to my formatted. So format life time. And that's it. Finally, all I need to do is return a response. Okay, we covered quite a bit of ground. Does anyone have any questions?
I kind of have one. Back to the cookies. So when we visit a website and it asks us whether we want to allow cookies or not, what exactly is that doing? Is that only keeping the token for the session?
So I believe those cookies are more of the tracking cookies, where they're trying to utilize those cookies to see what type of activity you're doing while being on the site. And it's a way of different organizations to gather information about what individual users are interacting with and what they're not, so that they can decide what features they can have or what features they should get rid of.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Of course. Okay. So finally, this login process should be done. We expect it to work correctly. I'm just going to go ahead and escape here. And then I'm going to write and quit. Okay. So now I need to fix my front end. So let's go ahead and change directory into my front end. I need to go inside of the SRC folder. And then the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change utilities. So I'm going to sudo vim utilities gsx. Okay, well, we did this utilities portion, right? But currently Axios isn't tracking that there's about to be credentials coming back and forth from individual requests. So I need to update that. I need to tell Axios that, hey, expect there to be credentials every time you make this request. So all I have to say is, hey, this is happening with credentials. I can write and quit this information. Okay. Finally, I can go into my login page. And now in my login page, I need to change this method. All right. So I'm going to come here. I know that I'm going to send this information to a user. If a catch, I should have an invalid token. But I'm no longer grabbing my token from my data. I am no longer setting it to local storage. And I am no longer setting it as a header for Axios. Everything else should remain the same. So I just needed to comment these things out. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and escape here. Write and quit. And then we're going to go through the same process as we did yesterday of running the build, copying our build folder onto Nginx, and then restarting Nginx. So I'm going to run npm run build.
Francisco, I think you had the same verbiage for the local storage in the app JSX and the register page JSX.
I do, yes, correct. I'm trying to focus on only the login function.
Gotcha.
Just to make sure that we stay focused.
Okay.
All right, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this folder recursively. And I'm going to copy it into users /share /nginx /html. Okay, so that copied my folder. And finally, I can go ahead and say, all right, well, now that that's happened, I want to restart Nginx. So sudo service restart. Oh, and actually it's Nginx restart. And then I want to make sure everything's working correctly. So I'm going to kill G unicorn. Go into my backend. And then I'm going to run G unicorn without daemon. So G unicorn to do project.wsgi -- bind 00008,000. Okay, so G unicorn's working correctly. Everything's going well. I can refresh the site. I see that there's no local storage. I think I could empty this out. Perfect. So I emptied it out. And let's send these credentials. So I click submit. Okay, so it seems like I got some incorrect credentials. I wonder why that is. It never even got to my backend from what I can see here. Huh. Interesting. Let me check the console real quick. Now read properties of undefined data. Well, that's fair. Interesting.
Is it because your app JSX wraps the login page? Never mind. There's no data attribute on there.
Yeah, it's sending this request, but it's coming back as a bad request with 400. And I wonder why it's coming back as a bad request. Oh, I'm sending back a bad request in my try and accept block. Okay. Well, the user does exist, so it is able to authenticate, I believe. I may have to do a little bit of debugging here. Let's see. So change directory into my user app. sudo vim views. Okay, from datetime. All of this should be working correctly, as far as I know. I wonder if I just did an incorrect syntax. That's what's going wrong.
So that request is essentially becoming null from the front end. It's not receiving the data.
Yeah, it's trying to send a request, and it looks like Django is receiving the request correctly, but then sending back a bad request. And actually, let me add a print statement here, making sure that this is being triggered. That's capitalized. Okay, escape WQ. All right, and now all right, so I'm gonna bind you unicorn real quick. I'm gonna submit this request. Okay, so the request isn't being accepted by Django for some reason. Let me see what exactly is going wrong here.
You think it's not making it out of the front end?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's making it out of the front end, like even touching Django. Hmm. Let me see. This was working well until I did this. So maybe that's the difference. And let me WQ that. And then CD into my pages. And then I'm going to go into login. Let me make sure here everything's working correctly. Still sending it to API/users email. Yeah, everything should be working well from the front end as well. All right, let's see.
You console log some stuff in the front end to see what comes out.
I can, yeah. Let's see.
Like starting with a maybe username at the start.
Let's see. Oh wow, that is annoying. Console.log. Let's do response. Okay, so now I have my error, I have my alert, and then it's supposed to navigate me over to home, which it's not able to do. Okay, let's make sure this is working correctly. Escape. npm run build. And now I get to copy it. I apologize to everyone for the debugging section. Hopefully everyone's learning how to debug from watching me do it over and over again. So that's a plus. All right, so sudo cp, and then I want to go ahead and copy my dist folder. I want to do this into user slash share nginx HTML. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to restart nginx.
I wonder if the app component has something to do with it, because it's wrapping the login component. I'm just
Well, it's just sending a GET request, so I don't think so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's coming back as post, right?
All right. So let me make sure here, and then I want to do unicorn. Oh, and then my project. So to do project.wsgi -- bind. Okay, so everything should be running well now. Let me refresh this site really quick. Okay, so it comes back as incorrect credentials. Here's the message. So request failed with status code 400. There is no print statement, unfortunately. Let's see. But why was it a bad request though? You're not telling me why it was a bad request. Oh, nope, that's not it either. Never mind. I thought I had a breakthrough.
Francisco, when it says cannot read properties of undefined reading data, is that it trying to read the response dot data and the response is undefined?
It is, but the problem's coming back from here because the response is coming back as 400. So since it's a bad response and never returns anything, so maybe I should just try to cause an error on purpose instead of trying to handle it. And then maybe that will give me my error. So I'm gonna go ahead and go into my views one more time.
So like it's not making it out of the front end. That's why the response data is coming back as undefined. So something in the front end when it sends it to the Axios is a problem.
I think it's a backend problem because it's sending the response and it's coming back as 400. So one of these is being triggered. But it's not showing me that print statement, which is likely just a G unicorn thing where it doesn't show me print statements. Let's see. Let me double check my syntax here. Okay. Worst scenario, I'm going to try this out really quick. I really wish there was a faster way of commenting everything out on Vim. Okay, so I have datetime, I have my login, sending my request, building the request, authenticating the user, getting my lifetime, formatting that lifetime, setting the response, returning said response. Okay, let me try that. Incorrect credentials, bad request. Oh, okay, let me see. Don't have any credentials anywhere.
Do you think the header still has something saved? I was running into that error issue that wasn't deleting the API header.
It could be that. But I just tried going into my console and deleting it. Because right now in my application tab, I don't have any headers or any tokens anywhere.
What if you click log out? That may trigger that log out function and clear the delete headers common, API default headers common. That
Yeah,
might do it.
right now it's not letting me even register. So if I go to
Yeah, that's true.
so if I go to register and try to submit a login, I get the same failure. So there's something in my login function that's not working correctly. And it's more than likely happening from the settings that I just set, rather
In the
than
settings.
yeah, I think my cores is what's messing it up. Let me see what's going on here. Yeah, I'm so sorry, everyone. I think if everybody wants to take a pretty long break, let's call it like a 30-minute break and then come back afterwards. Hopefully I have this figured out by then. And if I don't, then I'll have to reassess this lecture and try to give it again tomorrow. I apologize. I'm gonna go ahead and pause this recording. All right, welcome back, everyone. I think I said that right as soon as Ivan dipped, but that's okay. He was here while he was watching me debug. We were able to figure out what the problem was. It seems like the problems was inside of our settings. So inside of our settings, we set allowed host to our actual domain name, and same thing for course allowed origins. But the problem with setting those to our actual domain name is that Nginx isn't connecting to this specific host name, right? We're telling G Unicorn to host it at 000, and Nginx is connecting G Unicorn with our application at 0.0.0. So that's where the problem was coming from. I'll make sure that the notes get updated. But now that we were able to figure that out, we can run G Unicorn as a daemon service. And we can log in. So let's say I want to clear this out. I'm going to refresh. It's going to automatically log me out because I don't have any cookie storage, right? I don't have anything in my local storage. But if I go into my cookies and now I send my Gmail or my email with a password, and I click on submit, we'll see that the request comes back successfully. I receive a token as my key for my cookie and a value for my cookie. All right. So we did everything correctly as far as code goes. Everything was fine. The only problem was that I needed to fix my settings.py to reflect the correct hosting, the correct host. Does anyone have any questions over what we covered or what went wrong? Okay, it doesn't seem like.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
what?
Takes me a second to grab my mic. The setting for inside the Nginx where you set the 000, the basically the null IP address, that whatever you set that to is what you're gonna have to change in your settings PY. That's what it's going to need to contact, correct?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. So now the next thing that we need to do is we actually need to tell Django how to grab this information, right? Because if I go and click my refresh, I expect whoAmI to be able to send a request and log me back in, but it's not able to do so. Well, that's because when it sends the request, it tries to grab a cookie from local storage, which it doesn't exist, right? Our token doesn't exist inside of local storage anymore. It's now inside of an HTTP cookie. So now we need to tell Django how to accept this HTTP cookie, because currently token authentication isn't doing the trick. So let's go ahead and change directories here into my user app. And I'm just simply going to create a new file named utilities.py. And then I'm going to write inside of it. So in this file, what we're going to do is we're going to create our own authentication class. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply inherit token authentication. And then I'm going to bring in a couple of exceptions to be able to create my own token class. So let's bring in token authentication first. From Rust framework dot authentication, import token authentication. On the next line, I'm going to say from Rust framework dot exceptions, import authentication failed. All right, and then finally, I'm going to actually initialize my own token authentication class. So I'm going to say class HTTP only token. I'm just going to name it that. And I'm going to utilize inheritance to grab token authentication. All right, so now I've started my class, and there's a couple of methods that I want to override. So the first one's going to be my get auth token from cookie. So originally we have one that grabs it from the header. Instead, I wanted to grab it from the cookie. So I start this method, and I'm going to simply return my request dot cookies dot get token. So this is going to go into the cookies of the request, right? Which we can see the cookies. Every time I send this request, all the cookies are being sent to my server. And I'm just going to grab the value of token. Okay, so that's what it's grabbing. That's what's being returned. All right, now I'm going to actually authenticate my user. It's going to take in request. And then I'm going to grab my auth token. So I just made this method. I'm just going to call the method itself. So get auth token from cookie. All right, so this request gets triggered. I want to authenticate a user. So I'm going to grab an auth token. And that token is going to be grabbed from my cookie headers under the key of token. All I need to do is pass in the request here. And then finally, I get into a couple of statements. So if not auth token, then I want to return none. So if this is none, which is falsy, I need to do if not auth token, saying like, hey, if there isn't an authentication token, don't return anything. And if there is, I want you to return self.authenticate credentials. Auth token. And this authenticate credentials, well, that's just coming in from Django. So let's take a look at it. So I'm overriding the authenticate method. So I'm utilizing polymorphism to change the authenticate method. And then I'm just authenticating credentials where I pass in that individual token. Okay, so this is all I need. It seems like this is pretty working out pretty well. I have my two methods inside of this function, and it should be working correctly. So let's go ahead and escape now. I'm gonna write and quit that file. And then I'm going to vim into views. All right. So now we created that method, but we need to import it. Well, sorry, we created that class, but now we need to import it. So I'm going to say from dot utilities import HTTP. Oh, that's not what I named it. HTTP only token. And I believe that's all I called it. Let me double check. HTTP only token. Okay, that seems to be correct. Going back into my views. Okay, so from utilities, import HTTP only token. And all I'm going to do now is for both my logout and my info section, I'm going to add that information. So I'm going to go ahead and change my authentication class. So instead of utilizing token authentication, it's going to use my HTTP only. Okay, so now I'm going to write and quit, change directory one back. And then I'm just going to run gunicorn one more time. Ooh, actually, gunicorn's running on a background server, so I'm just going to kill it. And then run it. Okay, everything seems to be working correctly. If I go to refresh it, I should be able to submit my login function. And now I should also be able to refresh. Interesting. So it seems like when I refresh, it didn't work. And that's because my whoAmI function is depending on a token. So I need to change my whoAmI function now. So I'm going to change directory over to my front end. Ooh, and I don't think that's in pages. I think that's an app. So I'm going to say sudo vim app JSX. Okay, and here's the problem. So it's saying, hey, I want you to grab a token. If there is a token, then send the request. Well, that's not what I want you to do anymore. I want you to send this request no matter what. And instead, once this request is completed, well, I'm just going to say if response.data, then I want you to set the user to response.data and navigate to home. Otherwise, I want you to navigate to login. Okay, so let me escape here. Write and quit this file. And then finally, I can just copy it and do the whole restart for Nginx. Yeah, updating the front end takes a little bit of work. So we can see my disk folder is being created. Nope, not sudo vim, sorry, sudo cp -r, so that's gonna copy it. .dist, that's gonna go into user / share nginx HTML. Okay, so that copies it. Finally, I can go back to my backend. I can service nginx restart. So sudo service nginx restart. So I should restart nginx. And then I can find gunicorn. gunicorn to do project .wsgi -- find 000 and then 8,000. You can see
Francisco, what's the difference between killing it and then starting it over or restarting it? Nginx.
There is no difference between stopping nginx and then starting it over, but by restarting, you're essentially doing both of those commands at one. You stop it first and then afterwards start it again.
Oh, okay. Because I see you earlier you did a pkill gunicorn, and then this time you did service nginx restart. I was wondering what the difference between the two.
Got it. Yes. So gunicorn is kind of has different commands than nginx. Nginx could be run through the servicing command, while gunicorn could not. Gunicorn has to be killed through actual Linux commands, such as pkill, or you could utilize grep to be able to actually interact with it.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so now if everything's working correctly, I should be able to refresh my page. We just saw that it was refreshed. It was able to send the request with the token authentication. My backend was able to grab the token from the HTTP location because we don't have anything here. All right, so I was able to grab my token from HTTP headers and authenticate my user. So now, since I know that's working correctly, I can update my logout view. And actually, before I keep going forward, I know we just covered a lot of ground. Do we have any questions by any chance?
Yeah, those cookies are like session specific, or if you close the browser and open it, and it's gonna delete it, or it's gonna stays on a computer.
I don't believe so. Let me see. No, they are not session specific. So I have a different browser right now that's opened up on Tango Deb, and that is also holding my cookie, which should be on a separate session. It may depend on the browser that you're utilizing. I may be able to open up something else like Safari and then go into it. Let me check that. Yeah. So now you can see here, I'm inside Safari, I'm inside of my storage, and I'm looking at the HTTP cookies, and there's nothing there. Right? But I can still log in. I can still pass in fr@fr.com, fr, and when I submit, apparently it doesn't work in Safari for some reason. Let me check this. Oh, status code 200. Okay, yeah, Safari may have its own little default way of handling HTTP headers. Because it looks like it doesn't like me. Oh, wait, I'm trying to log in. I apologize. Yeah, it looks like Safari doesn't like me doing this. Am I running gunicorn actually? Let me check. Gunicorn's not running. So that could be the problem. That is almost 100% the problem. Well, let's see. Right, so G Unicorn wasn't running. Now I'm able to log in through Safari as well. Right, and now I have my cookie as well. If I go over to my storage, check the cookie, there's my cookie. Did that answer your question?
Yep, thanks.
All right. So we have all this information. I'm able to run it correctly, but now I want to be able to log out. So let's get into logout. So I'm going to Vim my user app, go into my views. And in my views, I can see that I already have this logout function. And it's deleting the token from my user. Well, what about the HTTP token? I also want to delete it from the HTTP headers. Well, in order to delete it from my HTTP headers, all I need to do is I need to actually give it the command to delete the cookie. So all I'm going to say is, I'm going to send back this 204 response, right? But I'm going to set this to response equals. And that's just going to give me a variable so that I can interact with the response. Then I can say response dot delete cookie. Just like we had a set cookie method, we have a delete cookie method. And then I'm going to return the response. WQ. And then I believe I need to fix some things in my front end. Let me make sure here. Where's my app.jsx? Here's logout. Okay, this shouldn't cause, both of these shouldn't cause an error, so I should be fine to run it this way. But you would essentially want to remove those. Let me bind everything through G Unicorn. If I refresh my page, it's able to log me in. And if I log out, well, now we can see my cookie has disappeared. That's because the HTTP response came back with a delete cookie command. And that told my browser, hey, you need to delete this cookie because you're not allowed to have it anymore. And that's it as far as token authentication goes and how to manage tokens on the actual production side. Now you'll eventually want to replicate this behavior for your logout and your register functionality. And you also want to make sure that any views, depending on token authentication, have the HttpOnlyToken class for authentication. All right. So in conclusion, now we have a full stack application that's running a Django API, a React front end. I'm able to have a Postgres database that's using token authentication. I can log in, setting me an HTTP cookie that only HTTP can interact with, or my backend server. And I'm also able to log out. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions over what we've done over the last 3 days?
I just want to, I think Islam probably asked this question. So if I log in and refresh the browser, cookie stays, my session stays, I'm still logged in, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I close the browser without logging out and then open it up again, I'm still logged in because the cookie is still on my, I guess not local storage, but on my hard drive, correct?
It's on your browser, and yes.
Okay, yeah, so the browser will still, if I close it, I'll still be logged in when I reopen it.
Right. So here's my home, my list, and my logout function, right? I'm just going to close my browser real quick. Open up a new one. Oh, have another browser tab open. I apologize. Okay, so I open up the browser.
Bottom line is the only way to delete that cookie off of your browser is either let it time out or log out, right?
Exactly. So now when I go back to tangodep.com, it still takes me to a site that I'm logged in. Kind of like you do with LinkedIn, right? You sign in once, and then as long as you keep logging back in, you're still, you don't have to re-log back in every single time you visit LinkedIn. That's what we've set up here.
Got it. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
You
Thanks,
can't
Tom.
manually clear the cookies from the browser. That will be if I inspect here, go to application, click on cookies. I can just click this X here. Oh, hello. There you go. I can select it and click the X, and that will remove my cookie. So when I refresh, it doesn't give me anything.
Cool. Thank you, Francisco.
Of course, no problem. All right, if there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.